Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Namo sadanto suchetoye alahadi samyao samputoshe.
Namo sadanto suchetoye alahadi samya sambuddhoshe.
Homage to the Buddha's Flower Garland Sutra of great expanded teachings, and the ocean-wide Flower Garland Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing.
Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing.
Hua Yan Hai Hui Fo Pusa.
Hua Yan Hai Hui Fo Pusa.
Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing.
Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing.
Hua Yan Hai Hui Fo Pusa.
Hua Yan Hai Hui Fo Pusa.
The verse for opening the sutra. The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma in 100,000 million eons is difficult to encounter. Now that I've come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the best come one's true and actual meaning. Wu shang shen shen wei miao fa, bai qian wan jie nan zao yu, wo jing jian wen de sou chi, yuan jie ru lai zhen shi yi. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, and all Dharma Masters and friends in the Dharma. Amitofo. Tonight we have Dharma Master Liang and myself to continue. So, Liang Fashi, Dharma Master Liang doesn't come often to Berkeley, so I'm very happy that she was able to come tonight. She is a senior disciple of the Venerable Master, so I really look up to her. She has been a teacher, a mentor for me for many years, and she has worked at City of 10,000 Buddhas with leading the Sangha and of the Bhikshunis and coordinating many different things, and also working very hard to have Dharma Realm Buddhist University continue through all these years. She is also very involved in the landscaping of the City of 10,000 Buddhas right now, and many, many other things, but I won't embarrass her with that, so I think we'll let her start today, and then we'll go share the lecture.
Okay, I didn't know you were going to say those things, but the landscaping part is okay. So good evening, everyone. Tonight we're continuing with lectures on the 10 grounds chapter of the Avatamsaka Sutra. Since I don't come here often, so I will speak as a beginner in this lecture series and say that as you probably already know, this is the longest sutra in the Mahayana Chinese Buddhist tradition. And this sutra describes the path of enlightenment that a bodhisattva takes in great detail, including all of the practices and dharma doors that the bodhisattva undergoes. So this is the 26th of 39 or 40 chapters, depending on how you're counting. And this is the 6th of 10 grounds. So grounds is 10 grounds is translates shi di in Chinese. Shi being the 10, di being the grounds. And the word di can also be translated as a place, a locality, a territory, a position, or a situation. And various translators used various other words for translating di. The reason why in BTTS we translate it as grounds is due to the Venerable Master's explanation of the sutra. So, okay, so now I'm going to tell you a story. I was told that everything's okay as long as I tell stories, so I'll tell you a story. And this story, you probably have already heard that it took the Venerable Master 9 years to translate this, to lecture on the sutra, that he lectured daily, often 2 or 3 times in a day, not always on only this sutra. When he began this sutra, we only had Gold Mountain Monastery in San Francisco, but further along the way, he obtained the city of 10,000 Buddhas and continued the lecture series there. And he would, during those days, he lived half the time in Gold Mountain in San Francisco and half the time in CGTB. He would travel back and forth every week, much like the professors and staff and students of DRBU travel back and forth each week between Berkeley and CGTB. So in that way, we're continuing the tradition that the Venerable Master started. Of course, he was much older than most of us here now during those days. And even so, it was really hard for us all to keep up with him. Not only did he go back and forth between San Francisco and CGTB, but he also, as more branches were established in DRBA, he would travel to those places also. He would go to LA, he would go to Seattle, he would go to Vancouver, once a month, once every other month. And maybe once a year or every 2 years, he would take a delegation to Asia, Europe, and other places. So he was extremely vigorous and put us all to shame because we just really couldn't keep up with him. But this night, the night of this particular story that I'm going to tell you took place at the city of 10,000 Buddhas. It was in the middle of the winter, and it was in the early 80s, I believe. And at that time, the city of 10,000 Buddhas was not developed at all. And the infrastructure of the city was very old and broken down. And we didn't have heat in the Buddha Hall like we do nowadays. But we did have lights, and and we did have the warmth of the Venerable Master to keep us all warm. Anyway, on this particular night, middle of winter, it was raining, as I recall. Cats and dogs outside. It was very cold. I remember it being very, very cold. And Shifu was lecturing on the Avatamsaka Sutra. And when he lectured, he was sitting on the high seat, and we were all sitting on the floor beneath the Dharma seat. And some of you may not know that he didn't have very good eyesight in his old age, but he refused to rely on glasses, as I do. So when he would place the sutra in front of him on a stand, a table stand, and as he read the sutra, he would get very close, kind of like this, and squint his eyes so he could see. And then he would explain the sutra passage. So this night, as usual, he was reading the sutra passage to begin the Dharma talk. And then suddenly, the power was cut off. All the lights went out. there was no light, not a single light in the Buddha hall, not a candle, not a light on the altar, and it was pitch black in the Buddha hall, so dark. And one of the laymen, got up and rushed out to try to go get some candles and some lanterns and some flashlights. And we were all sort of in a state of shock, And then suddenly I realized that the Venerable Master didn't stop reading the sutra. And then it dawned on me that in fact he wasn't reading the sutra. He was reciting the sutra either from memory or from his self-nature. I really couldn't say what it was. But he was certainly not using his eyesight to read the sutra. And he was totally unperturbed. It was as if nothing had happened. His voice didn't falter or change. He didn't slow down or speed up. He just kept going as if nothing had happened. And it was as if he didn't even notice it at all. Okay, and then I realized that his state was different from my state right now. Well, the lights came on and he continued to speak again as if nothing had happened. And from that I learned that when the Venerable Master spoke the Dharma, he was in an inconceivable state, not something that I could understand. And so when he explained the sutras, I thoroughly believed in his authority to understand them and to reveal the principles in them. And so when he, in his explanation of the first chapter, I'm going to quote what the Venerable Master said. He said, "All things that exist are born from the ground, grow because of the ground, come to maturity by means of the ground, and obtain liberation or fruition due to the ground." And so we translate D as ground, because it fits with what the Venerable Master explained. Moreover, he explained that hidden within the ground, within the earth, are massive, vast treasures, such as precious metals, precious gems. And in order to reveal them or uncover them, they need to be mined. And likewise, the 10 grounds contain the most precious treasures of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and in fact, the treasures of the self-nature of our own minds, our mind ground. But in order to uncover them, to reveal them, we need to mine them or cultivate. And these treasures also refer to the Dharma doors that are expounded upon in the 10 Grounds chapter. Because cultivating, developing, and bringing to maturity the Bodhisattva path to liberation is all done by means of these treasures, these Dharma doors that are found in the ground of the Buddha nature, in the mind ground. So, before we continue with tonight's lecture, as a newcomer to this series, I'm going to reset the stage, the scene, to remind us all what was happening when this Dharma was being spoken. So when I read this, I imagine a huge international symposium of eminent colleagues, bodhisattvas. And then multiply that to infinity so that it includes representatives from every world throughout the universe. And the topic is, of course, the 10 Bodhisattva grounds. The symposium is presided over by the Buddhas of the 10 directions, and the participants are the Bodhisattvas of the highest order. And also listening are the gods, the celestial beings, also from the Dharma realm, the 10 Dharma realms, the 10 directions. And they are there to help usher, maybe they're ushers or they help arrange the venue. Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva is the speaker. And he is speaking from a state of deep samadhi and is being spiritually aided by the Buddhas of the 10 directions. So this is the setting. And this exposition on the 6 grounds began with a celebration. The celebration was a natural kind of outpouring, or no, I shouldn't say outpouring, it sounds too much like outflows, but a natural response to having heard the dharmas of the 5th ground of the Bodhisattvas. This is a very natural response to hearing the Dharma. Everyone in the assembly was supremely delighted, and the Bodhisattvas in their minds, they rained down flowers, and they mentally scattered precious gems, and they admitted pure light. And the gods also made offerings of flowers, gems, and lanterns, and all kinds of Dharma offerings. And so in Buddhism, when we make offerings, it is not due to some social convention or obligation. It is a direct and pure expression of our profound gratitude. And this may take a material form, or it might simply be the expression of our minds. Feelings of gratitude, feelings of reverence, of adoration for the Dharma. So following this natural celebration, having heard of the 5th ground, everyone prepares themselves to hear about the 6th ground, Dharma doors. And these eminent bodhisattvas and celestial beings were energized, alert, reverent as they quietly sat to hear about the 6 grounds. So, although there was one speaker, Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva, everyone in the assembly was engaged in hearing the Dharma, was engaged in turning the Dharma wheel. And so from here I will turn it over to Dharma Mastery.
Okay, so I'll continue from the introduction and also say a little bit of context. We know that we're talking about the 6th ground right now, and these grounds and the dharmas in them are all from our self-nature, so we should feel very connected to them. So each ground has its focus and kind of the level of attainment of the bodhisattva on that ground. On the 4th ground, there was a focus on transcending the world, of, kind of leaving this world. But on the 5th ground, the bodhisattva kind of comes back into the world and is able to accord with the world. And if you remember, was learning all the different fields of knowledge and skills that are in the world. But at that level, he or she still was judging what is pure and what is defiled, and seeing some part of the world as defiled. On the 6th ground, the bodhisattva comes to be able to contemplate the world, the mundane, as neither pure nor defiled, as he comes to be able to see everything as being equally empty and empty of a self. And it's called the ground of manifestation because as one contemplates all different aspects of conditioned arising or dependent origination, then prajna manifests, prajna wisdom manifests before one. And the part where we're at right now, which I'll do a little review too, it's talking about the fruition, meaning the results of some of the work that's been done. So this fruition on the sixth ground has 5 aspects. The first part is talking about the counteracting practices that the Bodhisattva does that leads to freedom from certain obstacles. And that relates to the being able to get beyond seeing things as defiled. And then after that, there is cultivating practices pertaining to this ground. And that section we'll be dealing with today. And then after that, there will be a section on attaining different kinds of samadhis of emptiness. And then the fourth one is attaining an indestructible resolve. And then finally, there's attaining self-mastery. So each section actually is roughly divided by whenever it starts with disciples of the Buddha, that starts a new section. Although in the second section, there's 2 disciples of the Buddha. So if we remember from last time, or last couple of times, maybe we can turn to the sutra text on we're on page 25, but we're going to start on page 21 just to go quickly through a review. So on the bottom of page 21, it's where the Bodhisattva is starting to contemplate the 10 kinds of marks, and then he realizes the liberation door of emptiness. Here, this is part of the counteracting practices, to counteract seeing things in the conditioned world as having some reality. So first he sees everything as empty. That's the liberation door of emptiness. And then after that, he needs to not even hang on to the mark of emptiness. So he has to see that even emptiness is empty. And so that's the liberation door of marklessness at the bottom of 21. And then based on emptiness and marklessness, because he sees everything as empty and he has no attachment to any kind of mark, which is a kind of notion or a sign of anything, then he no longer has any hopes or expectations of gaining anything, a worldly thing or status, but instead he just wants to teach and transform beings out of great compassion. And so that is the liberation door of wishlessness. These are 3 different liberation doors, which they're kind of passages or portals to liberation or nirvana, and also they entail 3 kinds of samadhi. So then, because of cultivating these 3 different passages to liberation, the Bodhisattva becomes free from thoughts of self, free from all these different notions of, because beings are now considered as empty. They're empty in their nature, and therefore they cannot they cannot create, receive karma. They're actually empty of function as well. So then the next part on page 23, in the middle part of page 23, disciples of the Buddha, this Bodhisattva Mahasattva's great compassion develops and increases. This is the beginning of the section where the Bodhisattva is cultivating practices specific to this ground. And you can see that he's both cultivating compassion to he's cultivating compassion, which is directed towards helping others, but he's also cultivating the Bodhi share dharmas, which are to help himself advance in his practice. And probably the Bodhi share dharmas have been discussed in previous lectures, so we won't go over that unless there's a question or there's about that. But basically, these dharmas are cultivated since the beginning of the grounds, and he's still working on perfecting them. There's basically they're being very mindful and aware as they're selecting a dharma, vigorously cultivating it, feeling the joy that comes from that cultivation, and while casting out coarse delusions and renouncing subtle delusions, cultivating samadhi and then mindfulness. In all of these, he has a specific kind of awareness that is the Bodhisattva dharmas. Then, let's see. Okay, and then last time we heard the last paragraph of of page 23, where we start to see how he has the Bodhisattva contemplates the conditioned, meaning everything in the world, as having many faults and causing, it's very troublesome, and yet it also has no nature of its own, so it's empty. So he or she has the wisdom of seeing everything as empty, but at the same time giving rise to great compassion and not forsaking living beings. And because of this, there's the manifestation of prajna paramita, the light of wisdom. Okay, so now we're on page 25 at the top, and maybe we can recite the sutra text first on Chinese and then English. Okay, everyone, top of page 24. 成就如是智光明矣，随 Okay, you can repeat. 成就如是智光明矣，虽修习菩提分因缘而不住有为中。修习菩提分因缘而不住有为中，虽观有为法自性即灭。亦不住即灭中，以菩提分法未圆满故。Okay, English. Once he has accomplished such light of wisdom, although he cultivates the causes and conditions of the Bodhi shares, he does not dwell in the conditioned. And although he contemplates conditioned dharmas as being in their own nature still and extinct, he also does not dwell in still extinction, because he has not yet perfected the Bodhisattva dharmas. Okay. So this part, it reminds me of what we recite at the City of 10,000 Buddhas before morning and evening recitation. The part that says, encountering specific matters, we understand the principles. Understanding the principles, we apply them in specific matters. Where the specific matters is kind of like the conditioned, and then the principle is that everything is still and extinct and empty of a nature. So the Bodhisattva is able to stay in the world and be among specific matters, doing work, interacting with people, and taking care of business. But at the same time, he doesn't dwell in the conditioned. So he's taking care of affairs, but he's also cultivating the causes and conditions of the Bodhi shares. So he's cultivating, and I guess we do have. Do you all know what the Bodhi shares are? No. Okay, so maybe let's go over them. So it's talking about the whole process of cultivation, but that we have, in each step, we have discernment. So, for example, the first one is I would like to call it the awakening factor in selecting a dharma. And I should also preface this saying that there's some different versions of the 7 Bodhi shares. So this is the one that I took from Venerable Master's commentary in Avatamsaka Sutra, because we mentioned the 7 Bodhi shares in the Avatamsaka Sutra, right? So in the first stage, you're selecting a dharma to cultivate, a dharma door. Or you're also selecting what are wholesome dharmas and what are unwholesome dharmas. You have to contemplate with wisdom and skillfully distinguish what is genuine from what is phony, and avoid following the false dharmas, the dharmas that won't lead you to liberation. And then secondly, when you do select what is wholesome to cultivate, which are the dharmas of the path, you vigorously cultivate it. And however, even in vigor, you have to apply your vigor in the correct way. There are things called unbeneficial ascetic practices that are not helpful. They don't liberate your mind. So that was when the Buddha was a prince and he was first searching for a teacher. He went and experimented with different kinds of ascetic practices, following different teachers, and found that they did not liberate his mind from suffering. So he gave those all up and then went to sit under the Bodhi tree and practice. There are, of course, beneficial ascetic practices too, that help us to reduce our desires and to focus our minds. So when vigorously cultivating, you have to choose the right way to do it and stay on the path of genuine dharma. Maybe later, if Liang Hua Shi, you think of some examples, you can do it. You can give, because I'm just going through the list. So then, as you're cultivating vigorously and you're on the correct path, then you should have some joy from it. It shouldn't be that it's very bitter and it's bitter to the end. You derive joy from cultivation, and this joy is in your heart. And you also have discernment in the joy, because we have joy, pleasure from different kinds of things in life. So when you have the joy of the Dharma, you're able to discern that this is joy that comes from genuine cultivation of the Dharma. It doesn't come from doing confused things and, just indulging your senses, or from, getting praised a lot and having a big ego. So it's joy it's a true, genuine Dharma joy, which is very different in character from ordinary joy. And in cultivation, we have to cast out a lot of wrong views, and these are delusions. So they're coarse delusions and they're subtle ones. So we have to, when we're getting rid of these mistaken views and the afflictions that come with them, then we also are very discerning that even though we cut these things off, it doesn't harm our genuine, what we call good roots, or roots of goodness, which is a foundation that we have from doing wholesome deeds. So when we cut off things that are negative, it doesn't actually harm our nature or our genuine goodness. That's foundational. When we then, as we get to the more subtle delusions, those are hard to detect and hard to renounce. When we start renouncing these, there are kind of different states that we get attached to, and we have to be discerning that the states that we're renouncing, they're actually false, they're not real, and therefore, once we renounce them, we never think to chase after them again. So that's the awakening factor of renouncing subtle delusions. And then the sixth one is samadhi. When we sit in meditation and we come to a state of calmness, tranquility, and then to dhyana samadhi, we also have to realize these states are all empty and false and not get attached to them, because they can also be very pleasant, very blissful, but we cannot attach to that kind of bliss. We have to remain unattached. And then we can, even worse, we should not have any delusions of, oh, I've already reached the ultimate state, or I'm now at such and such a level. And this, I think, maybe refers to something like the 50 skandha demons, which are 50 states that arise in Chan meditation, described in a sutra called the Shurangama Sutra, which is really important for Chan, or Chan Zen meditation, because when you're really working intensely on your mind can do strange things, and also different states can influence your mind. So how to recognize those and how to know that that's a normal state that you pass through, but not to get confused by it and think that you've already reached, the first, second, third, fourth dhyana, or you've become an arhat or whatever. So in samadhi, you have to be careful not to get attached or deluded. And then finally, the seventh one is mindfulness. And that is mindfulness to always balance samadhi with wisdom. So it says that when the mind is lethargic, we should mindfully apply these bodhi shares, these factors of awakening, the first three, which are selecting a dharma, vigorously cultivating it, and then discerning the joy that comes from it. And that will alert and stimulate the mind. That's when you're lethargic. And when you're restless, then you should mindfully apply the next three factors of awakening, which are about casting out the coarse delusions, renouncing subtle delusions, and practicing samadhi to focus the mind and attune it and moderate it. So these are the 7 bodhi shares that this bodhisattva on the grounds has been cultivating from the beginning, but getting to ever more refined realization of how to practice these. So he is okay. So it's basically also saying the bodhi shares, they involve causes and conditions and being in the world, but he doesn't dwell in these. He doesn't dwell in the conditioned world. He doesn't get attached to anything in the conditioned world. And how does he do this? He contemplates that there are these conditioned dharmas in the world, from physical material things on the table, the bell, to people, to events, to whatever you can think of, phenomenal. They are in their nature still and extinct. That means that basically they don't have any independent existence, and they're kind of illusory. They're dependent on other things to exist. So while he is active in the world, he doesn't lose sight of this principle that everything is empty, and so he doesn't get attached. But on the other hand, seeing this principle of emptiness and dependent arising, he doesn't let it disrupt his activities. That is, he doesn't dwell in the unconditioned and just do nothing because he sees that there's nothing to do. So I was looking at, this is from Master Qingliang Guoshi, and he was quoting the Vimalakirti Sutra, which explained that not putting an end to the conditioned means not relinquishing great kindness and compassion, and resolving to reach all wisdom, cultivating all good dharmas as a bodhisattva without any laxness. So that's how we don't put an end to the conditioned. We stay in the world. And then not dwelling in the unconditioned, meaning not dwelling in the still extinction part. It means we study and cultivate emptiness and marklessness and wishlessness, these three liberation doors, but we don't certify to them. We don't fully realize them. We contemplate all dharmas as false, empty, and without a self. But before our vows have been fulfilled, we don't empty out all the good dharmas, the blessings and merit and chan samadhi and wisdom, but we cultivate them. Because if we do put an end to conditioned existence, then we have no way to cultivate virtue and accomplish the wisdom of the Buddhas. Like the Buddhas need to be in the world as bodhisattvas to learn how to cross over every single living being, learn how to understand every single phenomena in the world and how it is. If we dwell in the unconditioned, if we really just go to nirvana and don't follow the bodhisattva path, we don't have the ability to teach and transform others. But at the same time, we can't dwell in the conditioned, meaning take everything seriously and not see it as empty, because then we will drown in samsara and also not be able to cultivate and accomplish the Buddha's wisdom. So I wanted to ask all of you if you can relate to this. This is a bit abstract, but if we think of ourselves or we can think of Venerable Master, what are some examples of how he did not dwell in the conditioned? I can give some examples to start off, but maybe you can also think of some just from knowing his biography. So, Venerable Master was a Buddhist monk. But obviously you could see from his teachings and from his actions that he did not care about anything for himself. Fame, profit, or even just small things. So I'll just share this story that we happened to hear when we were during the Chan session last winter. And when he was traveling, he was in Manchuria, and he was traveling south, and he was also going to meet Venerable Master Shuring, Empty Cloud. So he was taking a boat. Let's see which part of the story. He was taking a boat from Shanghai to Hankou, and not. Okay, no, sorry. That part is interesting, but it doesn't illustrate this principle very well. So it's when he reaches Hankou and then he gets off the boat. A lot happens there, but then he meets another monk at the train station, and he says, "Where are you going?" "Oh, I'm going to Guangzhou to meet Master Xuying." And the master said, "Oh, okay, I am too." And then he asked, "Do you have a train ticket?" So the monk said, No, I don't have any money. Don't ask me," because he thought master was going to ask him, can he buy him a train ticket? And then the master, okay, I do have to tell the story on the boat for this to make sense. So on the boat, the master, because he was cultivating these dharmas, and I'm sorry, this is a little bit mystical or magical, but it's just part of the story. He saw this cripple, and he knew that he could help this cripple, but there was a lot of people on the boat, and he didn't want to do it, and attract a lot of attention. So he waited until the last day of the boat trip, and they were about to dock. And then that day, the cripple happened to walk past him with a cane, limping along. And the master said, what happened to you? And he said, well, I was selling coal, and they made it illegal to sell coal. So then I was secretly selling coal, and they caught me, the government caught me and put me in prison, and the prison was very damp. So when I came out, my legs didn't work anymore. So the master said, would you like to be able to walk again? And then he said, well, yeah, of course. And the master said, well, if you would like to walk again, just toss your cane over the side of the boat. And the man was saying, no, how can you tell me to do that? If that happens, then I won't be able to walk. And the master said, well, if you trust me, toss your cane over the side of the boat and you'll be able to walk. So the man actually did so. I guess he really wanted to walk. And then the master did some blessings for him, and then told him, okay, now try to get up and walk. And so he got up, and the master said, walk, and he was able to walk. And the master said, run, he was able to run. But the boat hadn't docked yet, and then people started noticing that the cripple was running. And they said, what happened to you? I thought you were a cripple. And they said, oh yeah, but there was this old cultivator, and I don't know why, but he made me well. And then the master was inundated by people coming to him saying they had headaches, and they had backaches, and they had bad legs and so forth. And the master said, okay, it sounds like you all need a beating. So he started to kick the person with the bad leg and said, now can you walk? And then he hit the person with the headache and said, is your head better? And then they were all, yeah, now it doesn't hurt anymore. So then they started to make offerings, and this was, like Liang Fasha was saying, a spontaneous response of gratitude. So this person gave him this much, and this person gave him that much. So the master said that by the end of the day, when the boat docked, he had about $400 of US money. It was a lot more because of inflation in China, but he said it was equivalent to maybe $400 US money. So then he quickly got off the boat and kind of slipped away, because all these people were saying, oh, I have more family in Hankou who also have problems. And he said, okay. So he ran away and he went to the train station. And so he met this monk, and then the monk said, oh, I don't have any money, don't ask me. He said, no, I'm going to buy you a ticket. So he bought 2 tickets down to Guangzhou, and that took about half of the $400. And then there was $200 left. And then this monk, maybe he was a typical monk, he was always, the master was very kind and sat next to him, and when they came around selling food, he said, are you hungry? And he said, yes. So every time the food came around, he said, yes, I'm hungry. So I said, okay, I have this money, so why don't you use it? Because the master wasn't used to having money anyways, and This was just, there was somebody who was hungry, and he used it. And then when they arrived at Hankou, got off the train station, there was a noodle shop. And the monk said, "Oh, I really want some noodles." So the master had maybe, I don't know how much, just a little bit of money left. And so he said, "Here, take the rest of it." And so he started out with no money, and he got rich along the way, but then he ended up with no money again by the end of the trip. And it was all fine with him. So I don't know if that illustrates how not dwelling in the conditioned, it means you're in the world, but you don't know where your next meal will come from, and how you're going to, you want to go to, many hundreds of miles away to pay respects to a great Buddhist master, but you don't know how you're going to get there. You just let the conditions come and patiently let things happen, and it may take longer or not so long. So without any thought, any worries, any thought for yourself. So I think that's how the master kind of was. And
well, as I'm listening, I thought about the Dharma of fasting, because in the early days, I think many of his disciples were impressed by fasting, or were interested in fasting, or thought of it as a quote-unquote Dharma door. And you probably all know that during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Venerable Master fasted for a very long time and transferred merit and virtue to help the merit and virtue from his sincerity and its sacrifice to help alleviate that situation. He would fast at times like that. And quite a few of his disciples also followed him in fasting, and he trained them how to fast for very long times. 18 days, a month, 48 days, for very long times. And there were several who fasted for a long time, like Dharma Master Lai, I believe Dharma Master Sher. And there was one who fasted for months, Dharma Master Kong. And I was thinking of this when you were reading the passage of and talking about about wholesome dharmas. You were talking about the 7 bodhishares, and how to distinguish between and unbeneficial ascetic practices. And so after many years, well, I came later, but I was also interested in fasting, and I had done some fasting as a layperson, and I thought that this was cultivation. And so when I first came to CDTB, the Venerable Master talked a lot about getting rid of false thoughts, and then of course you notice how many you have as soon as someone tells you not to have them, and they can, when you're trying to get rid of them, then they can become really ferocious and just come one right after the other. And I had heard that fasting helped with that, so I decided I was going to start fasting. And the Venerable Master wanted to travel from City of 10,000 Buddhas to San Francisco to Gold Mountain. I was still a layperson then. And Dharma Master Chur snitched on me, and she told the Venerable Master that I was planning to fast. And he had sort of someone appointed me to be his driver. And before I got into the car, behind the driver's seat, he said, "You absolutely cannot fast. I will not allow you to fast." He said, "It's enough to eat 1 meal a day reliably. Eat 80% every day, and that's cultivation." This is what he told me. But still, I was interested in fasting. And I knew that there was this Dharma door, this kind of that he will transmit and teach you how to do it. So Later on, after I became a nun, I wanted to do this fast. And some of the nuns had done it already. There was one nun in particular who did it, quite often. She would go on fasts. And she actually was the farmer among us. She organized us to plant vegetables. And it was probably because of her attachment to food that she decided she should fast to get rid of that attachment. So that's how we were in those days, okay? So anyway, I had done my fast, and I felt very, very good, very energized and cleaned out and everything. And this other nun had also been fasting around that time, and I saw her in JGH in the kitchen there. And she was doing some canning. She was canning tomatoes or something. And she asked me how I did on the fast, and I said, well, it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. And she said, yes, she said, this last fast that I did, I learned something. I learned that because people fast in order to get physical purity of the body and of the mind also. She said, I learned that no matter how long I fasted, basically the body is impure. And so there's really no way, no matter what you do, to really truly purify the body. And so she learned something from this. She learned a very important dharma from this. But I also heard Shifu say at one point, he said, fasting is a wai dao, dharma. It's a dharma outside the way. And what he meant was, it's a dharma outside of the mind. You're not cultivating your mind, you're cultivating the body. So although you can, if you cultivate this properly, you can have awakenings, certain kinds of understandings come from it. But if you don't cultivate it properly, you can get into what Dharma Master Yin was just referring to from the 50 skandha demon states. You can actually get into demonic states. So the one Dharma Master who fasted the longest, eventually that happened to him. And it had to do, his state definitely had to do with eating, with eating food. And so, although we can force ourselves to do these ascetic practices, and we can even have expedients to help us to do them, if we don't practice them with the right kind of mind, then we can also get into trouble. So those are the things I was thinking of when Dharma Master Yin was talking about the 7 Bodhi shares and cultivating dharmas. So Shifu often said, if it's a wholesome dharma, if it's a proper dharma and you cultivate it, but you do it with a devious mind or with the wrong kind of approach, then that dharma will become deviant. In other words, it will lead you astray. On the other hand, if it's a deviant dharma or an unwholesome dharma or an unbeneficial ascetic practice, but you approach it with a true mind and a proper mind, then it will become wholesome dharma and it will benefit you.
There's 25 minutes left. Just wondering if there's any questions or comments up to this point on what we've heard. Yes?
Could you elaborate on what happened to the monk as you were near, like, the end of his, like, fast? Like, you say, like, the states. I'm pretty sure you heard the question. But, like, what happened to that monk, and how's he now? I don't know. Like.
Should I talk about it? Should I tell you? In general, how do I talk about it in general? Well, okay. I think he fasted for like 4 months or something, very long. And when he came out of the fast, I think maybe he didn't do it properly. There's a way that the Venerable Master taught us to enter it and to come out of it. Just like when you're entering samadhi or coming out of samadhi, you use the bell and the fish, and there's a way to do that. But anyway, well, he ended up hearing voices, and they told him to eat at midnight. Since we eat 1 meal a day before noon, that was not okay to do. And the types of things they taught him to eat were not exactly edible. That's all I'll say about it. Anyway, he ended up actually also imagining himself to be able to fly or something. I don't know. But he ended up leaving. He went back to lay life. And that's what happened to him. That's all I'll say about it. So anyway, it's better not to do those things.
It's better to do things, follow your teacher too.
And so that although the daily practices that we do seem very simple, even though they can be difficult, they might seem boring at times for some people. But what happens spiritually is a very gradual and steady and reliable, progression along the path. It's safe, and it gets you there. So that's all.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Let me give a few more examples of not dwelling in the conditioned that the master seemed. For example, he wanted, when he spoke Dharma, he wanted his disciples to also practice and speak first. Sometimes even they took up all the time and he didn't get to speak at all, but that was fine with him. And in the beginning, the disciples were reluctant to speak, so he kneeled and put his palms together and begged them to speak. Most teachers with some kind of status would find it very hard. He even threatened that he would bow to them if they didn't go up on stage. So he was successful in getting some of them to go up. Now, and then Liang Pasha mentioned 1 meal a day. The reason, besides it being a beneficial ascetic practice for monastics, it's also, the master did it at the time when there was the Sino-Japanese war going on and there was famine throughout China. And he thought, well, he was a young man and he ate a lot. He said he would have 3 meals a day. Each meal he would have 3 bowls of rice and food. So he said, well, I'm going to cut down to 1 meal a day and just eat 1 bowl of rice because there are so many people who are starving, and at least if I don't eat the food, it will be around, maybe somebody else will get to eat it. And so at the same time, he did things, okay, then examples of not dwelling in still extinction. First, let me say a little bit about the translation still extinction. It sounds like dinosaurs. But actually, it's a very positive term. It's referring to it's like the absence, the extinction of afflictions and burdens, entanglements, fetters, false thoughts, suffering. So it's kind of a blissful thing. It's when you go into a state of samadhi where your mind empties out and you're just peaceful. And so usually when that happens, people want to stay there. So why come back to deal with the world and all the daily troubles and confusions that we have if we can be in this peaceful state? So that's a problem. And that's why one of the Bodhi shares was how not to get attached to that. So here, particularly bodhisattvas, refuse to dwell in still extinction. They want to teach and transform beings. So while they understand the principle and they perceive everything as empty, even the beings, living beings, yet they know that living beings, because they don't see things as empty, they're still suffering. They're still getting caught up and entangled and not being free. So then the Bodhisattva is compassionate and wants to teach the Dharma. And for our master, he was not only teaching Dharma in the traditional way, but he wanted to set up elementary schools and high school, university, and he also, the Bodhisattva has a lot to learn. So there's a progression. From ordinary people, we're in the conditioned realm of desires and material things, and we have egos and attachments and so forth. Then the first thing the Buddha taught was he taught the Shravaka dharmas, which teach them to give up, renounce, and give up attachments to those things because they cause suffering. And then so those Shravakas, which they strive to become arhats and dwell in the unconditioned, in this peaceful, tranquil, empty state. But then in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha teaches that that's just an expedient. That's actually not the ultimate state. What you think you've gotten, if you think you've certified to the fourth stage arhatship and it's nirvana, and that's it, that's not. Because actually if you are truly an arhat, you will then turn towards the bodhisattva path. And then the bodhisattvas have a lot more to learn. For example, the arhats can see everything as empty and not be affected by it, but the bodhisattvas have to bring everyone along, and everyone is actually no different than oneself because there's no self, right? And so the bodhisattva sees that everything is kind of this dream illusion, but has to bring everyone along to see that. And to do that is very difficult. So there's a lot of, the wisdom of skillful means is what the bodhisattva has to learn how to do to be able, it's just like being a teacher. You have to know how to reach everyone, to meet everyone's needs, to speak in their language, and to use all different kinds of ways to coax people to give up things that are unwholesome and go towards wholesome things, and to be able to have some wisdom to see that the things that we do are causing ourselves dissatisfaction or stress or suffering. So I think what I want to say is that one thing that I think helps is usually we take things pretty seriously. If you're a student, we take our classes and our grades and our assignments very seriously. If you're a worker, then you take your salary and what your boss says or thinks about you very seriously. If you're a husband or a wife, you care about what your spouse, how your relationship is and how you relate to each other. If you're a child, you really care about, what kind of, how your parents, you relate to your parents, or what they give you, what allowance they give you, or what freedom they give you, whatever. So because we take things very seriously, we give ourselves a lot of constraints, and we get upset because we feel there's a lot of constraints. But a sage is able to, meaning an awakened person of any sort of level, to some extent is able to see that what seems real or determined or imperative is actually not. It's actually, it's also just an ephemeral thing built on causes and conditions. And if we are patient enough, we can wait it out and see that things will change. And so they have a lot more wiggle room and choices before them. And also, they don't use a calculating mind. They're able to just connect with their nature, and the nature is connected with everyone and everything. So then they're able to just kind of follow along and figure out a way to go that is harmonious and follows the flow. And yet they never are wrong, or they're usually not wrong if they follow that. And they also don't hurt themselves. This kind of hurt refers to forgetting your nature. So when we're in the world and we take things seriously and we get caught up in things or goals or kind of fix things and our own judgments and views, then we tend to harm ourselves because we forgot about this nature that everything's all right there. Or have any questions? I guess I could say that as a monastic, I feel, or let's just say not even a monastic, just somebody who's on the path, we can take these bodhisattvas as our models, because we both want to kind of detach from the conditioned world, meaning not be so caught up in everything and take it so seriously, and especially with selfish aims. But we don't want to completely go to the emptiness side and not deal with anything, because we realize that everything's actually connected, so we can't separate ourselves. And so then the bodhisattva, the school for the bodhisattvas is to learn how to work together with everyone and to, be a positive influence on others. And this is extremely difficult. And so I can say I've seen, for example, Dharma Master Liang, she's, sorry, but just to take an example, we have a very diverse group of people in our association, and we're coming from different cultures, east, west, different backgrounds, different generations, and different political leanings, or even whatever. Everything's very different, but we have to work very closely together. And some people are very quick, and some people are more slow to react. So I think I've observed that sometimes I want to react strongly when I say, this is definitely wrong and we've got to change it, or we've got to do something. And I don't even know how to change it, but I just want to do something. So then I start to, and then that something might hurt somebody else eventually, but then fortunately I can sometimes ask Liang Fa Shi or some other Dharma sisters or people that we're working with, and they give us, well, let's look at it in this way. If you were that person, you might do the same thing. It's not that person's fault. It's really the system or the arrangement that caused this to happen. So maybe we can just talk and communicate a bit more before we act, or we can just wait and observe more and see how things develop, maybe. And then we find out things actually don't develop as we expected, because we didn't have a very complete point of view. And there are always more perspectives that we haven't considered. So I think the bodhisattva has to truly be able to listen and consider different perspectives, and then also do contemplations to see everything as connected and empty, and to use collective wisdom. Usually, most people who are drawn to cultivation tend to be loners. Many people actually don't like to, maybe because they don't have a good relationship with people, so they come and they want to work on themselves and go to peace directly, by themselves. This is I don't know. I know not everybody is like this, but so we commit ourselves to this path, and then we just want to meditate and get there. But then actually, that's not what it's about. So the master, when he was around, I heard that he designed all kinds of interesting situations to put people into together who were very mismatched, and to have someone who's very very strong and dominant with somebody who's very shy and whatever. So, but learning to work together and learning to overcome our own habits. I've heard over and over again from people, mostly my seniors, they say cultivation is just about changing our habits, our bad habits, and becoming aware of them first. And you only become aware of them usually when you're not sitting under a tree, but when you're working together with people. And then they tell you, or they don't tell you, but they just make you upset. And then you see, oh, I still have a lot of anger and impatience. And for me, I usually don't get angry in front of people, but I can, collapse and cry or whatever when I feel overwhelmed. And then that, I think now I've tried to see those situations as just lessons, and they're really good because they teach you where you need to work more. But ultimately that it's everything, it's okay.
My turn. Okay. I was sort of remembering how the Venerable Master, whenever he spoke the Dharma, he would actually demonstrate the principles in the Dharma that he spoke. So when he was speaking on the Avatamsaka Sutra, he would speak on a section, and then I would observe around that time that he was actually demonstrating what was spoken about in the sutra. And of course, I miss that very much. And it's something that I personally cannot do. But in speaking of non-attachment, of being in the world and yet being unattached to the world, speaking of emptiness and the realization of emptiness and the emptiness within emptiness and all of that. We who knew who drew near to the Venerable Master when he was still in the world, often observed that he had these qualities about him. He was totally unselfish, never thought of himself at all. And every breath was for speaking the Dharma or teaching and transforming living beings. And yet, even though he was in the world and apart from the world, he exhibited human emotion at certain times. I've even seen him cry publicly. I remember one time CDDB was hosting a symposium on education, and he invited Father Rogers. At that time, Father Rogers was teaching at Sonoma State College, and no, it was Sonoma. It was Sonoma State College, and he came to this symposium, and during the symposium, he spoke about the problem at that time that was very prevalent, which was almost an epidemic of suicides among students, college students, and how difficult it was to deal with and to help them. And usually whenever there was an event like that, Shifu would kind of walk around the room and, look at people, smile and see how you're doing. And at this time, he walked to the front and he openly cried. And he said, I can't imagine anything worse than a young person losing hope to the point that they would take their own lives. He was visibly, distressed by this. And so at the same time, though, he was able not to be pulled down by it. He himself never, became hopeless or depressed or, by these kinds of things that occurred around him in the world. He constantly encouraged us and inspired us and caused us to have self-confidence and confidence in the Dharma and in the practice of the Dharma and where it could take each one of us, whether we were male or female, young or old, Asian or Western. All of us, he encouraged to practice the Dharma and study the Dharma. And so I don't have any specific examples of that other than what I just told you, but that's all I'll say. That just came to my mind.
Yes.
You mentioned a lot about we had to let go, unattach, not to attach, but I kind of like not sure about that when it comes to the relationship with like my parents. How can I practice the way and yet according with the way and still love my parents and not being consider attachment?
Do you feel that you are particularly attached to them, or just kind of the normal?
I'm afraid that if I am still mentally bound with them, then it may be considered as an attachment.
Okay, sorry, thank you for the question, that's very good. Maybe we've been talking a little bit just out of context, so this, for somebody who is in the world and taking care of parents, it's definitely, it's one of the first most important practices is to be filial. To be filial means to honor and respect and take care of our parents, kind of like the first commandment, right? And so because our parents gave us our life and raised us and basically have a big part, a karmic connection with us too, we owe them a debt of gratitude. So actually cultivating filial piety is kind of a root practice that helps us to become, to set us on the path. So it's just, actually instead of trying to cut off that filial connection, we just try to expand it. So there's filial piety for our own biological parents, but we can also practice expanding that consideration and kindness towards other elders in our lives who have also maybe given us care or advice and guidance and wisdom. We can expand it towards elders who we don't have any direct connection with, but who maybe have no children to take care of them. There are a lot of people like that, or who have been abandoned by their children in old folks' homes and are very lonely. The master, he had a practice since he was 11 years old of bowing he did, I think, 1,600 bows, some per day, and he was trying to think of all the living beings that he should repay kindness to, starting with his parents, and then with his teachers, his elders, the leaders of the country, and then all the good people in the world, and all the bad people in the world, he was bowing on their behalf. And so that basically it's kind of expanding that. In China, it's a traditional practice to bow to your parents. He expanded that, 100,000 times. So basically he felt, and then he instituted an honoring elders day annually in each of our monasteries. He kind of on the spirit of to treat all elders as our own parents, and then also in a similar way to treat all children as our own children. I mean, this is taught not just by Buddhism, it's Confucian too, but it's kind of, if we can have that kind of care, that's the Bodhisattva's thing. So I think for you it's perfectly appropriate to do that. For us as left home people, we cannot be so connected to our parents in the sense that, I want to go home and see my mom and dad every day or something, because then we wouldn't be able to do what we've committed to. But that doesn't mean that we cut off our filial, our debt of kindness. We know we're trying to dedicate all of our practice to their benefit as well. And for myself, my parents are still, they're actually in the monastery. But that's not the case for everybody. But I think everyone's parents do benefit indirectly. For somebody who dedicates themselves to practicing the path, over the years you see some benefit, something good happens. Okay, I guess it's time, so maybe we can transfer the merit. Oh, question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to another question that it is because of a gratitude to parents that many people become monastics.
Say it again.
I just wanted to add the Nam's question that it is precisely because of a lot of people become monastics because of their gratitude to their parents.
That's true. Are there any announcements?
So today is Saturday. Tomorrow we have a full day of cultivation. We have the Amitabha session, or an Amitabha recitation day, starting from 7:30 in the morning to about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So people who would like to come and join us for a day of Amitabha recitation, everybody's welcome to do that. Otherwise, we have our university's classes starting here in the monastery as well. So Doug Powers will be teaching his class Buddhism for the Modern Mind starting Monday night, 7:30. Dr. Martin Verhoeven is teaching a Sixth Patriarch class on 7:30 on Friday. I believe Stephen Tanner's on Wednesday. We have Spirit Rock and also an Introduction to Buddhism class and roundtable kind of discussion starting on Thursdays. And so if people are interested in participating in any of our classes, please take a look at the flyers outside next to the door. I don't know if there's anything else that I'm leaving out. What's happening? So people are very welcome to join and participate in the events that we have. Yeah. Oh, it's the walking. I believe it's the style that they've been doing the last couple of years of doing the Dongling style. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. There's no other questions. No. Okay. Okay, so yeah, that's it.
Oh, yeah.
So for those first time here, we have the transference of merit on the back of the sheet.
Share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Now we do 3 bows.